Hi everyone, my name is Victoria and today I'll be doing a presentation on guardianship. So what is guardianship? It is a legal mechanism by which the state delegates authority over an individual's person or estate to another party. It can come in many different forms, with those being ladder type, also known as conservator committee, general, which is where a guardian has a type of total control over a person, estate, or both, and then limited, which is when the guardianship restricts the powers they have over an individual and is when they only have authority to make specific treatment decisions. With limited, the ward still has control over some of their assets. So a little history behind guardianship. It is most likely one of the most ancient aspects of mental health law. Roman and English common law states that the sovereign held the power and duty to guard the estate of incompetent persons. And in the late 1980s, there was a push for more rigorous and fair guardianship processes for the potential wards, which ended up leading to reforms. These reforms included things like requiring the courts to consider alternatives to the guardianship to provide the same outcome and protection for the ward. It also encouraged the presence of the ward at the hearing and assuring that evaluations of capacity assess function best as possible. So with guardianship comes clinical evaluations of the person they're wanting to take guardianship over. Many states do not require an evaluation prior to a proceeding. However, in most states it is provided if it's demanded by the petitioner or subject. And the clinician who is evaluating the possible ward must be aware of how the loss of autonomy is going to affect their evaluee. You can imagine if someone's being taken to court for someone to take over their whole life, basically, it's going to affect their mental well-being. And lead to stress and psychological consequences. The clinician should focus more on the range of functions they can perform for themselves. Tests that we use today will be the DAFS and ACED for assessing a person's individual function domains of daily living. Those include things like financial issues, transportation, communication, and then basically a person's everyday decision making. And these tests assess how well a person can make decisions in regards to their functional problems. With only 2 tests out of so many, it's hard for evaluators to really gain expertise in all of them, and it kind of alters the validity of how these tests, do we know if they're really working or not, and how well they're assessing a person's competence. Who can be a guardian? In most jurisdictions, any interested person can petition to have someone declared as incompetent and subject to their guardianship. These often include family members, government agencies, social workers, lawyers, sheriffs, and sometimes even clinical evaluators. Family members are often shown to be less impersonal because usually they have conflicts of interest, usually pertaining to the person's money, which is never a good thing, but sadly it happens. So someone who wants to take guardianship should always have the best mind of interest for the individual they're claiming guardianship for, but that is not always the case. The responsibilities of a guardian. There are 2 models of decision making for guardians. One is an objective test, and the other is subjective judgment. An objective test is considering, what actions will most effectively serve the ward's best interest. Deciding things with their financials and medicals, kind of just what's going to be best for them. While subjective judgment is thinking if on the ward's perspective, if they were competent, you would choose or act how he or she would have for these decisions if they were able to do so themselves. Legal requirements in regards to guardianship include things like the proceedings lack procedural rigor that has been shown consistent throughout decades. And then in a 2003 study of 506 guardianships in 10 states found that 25% of hearings lasted less than 5 minutes and 58% lasted than 15 minutes. You can imagine that with these hearings being so short, it kind of seems as if the judge just listens and they're like, okay, you say they're not competent and they're not, and just let somebody take power over them. You think with proceedings like this, it would be a lot more like intensive and questioning, looking at evaluations and making sure that this person really needs help and that somebody isn't just trying to take over their assets and their life. Often in these work proceedings as well, the counsel often was not present, and when they were present, they were silent, meaning that if they heard something that was kind of off, or they thought that maybe this person doesn't need guardianship, they kind of just didn't really say their word or their input. And then also with these proceedings, the proposed ward did not attend the hearing in 66% of the cases. This is more than half of these cases we're looking at. You would think that if somebody was being taken to court and somebody wanted guardianship over them, they would want to go or at least be there, because it is serious. Somebody's taking over all your personal decisions, life decisions. You'd think it would be mandatory for the ward to be there, and it's kind of weird. I was kind of shocked myself that that's not the case. So yeah. So I think one of the most popular cases we've probably all heard about of conservatorship, guardianship would be Britney Spears. Everybody knows about following a series of public incidents. When she shaved her hair off. It's kind of like a mental breakdown. Back then mental health wasn't seen as how it is now, so it was a very big deal. And everybody was concerned for her. She was hospitalized and put under conservatorship by her father, Jamie Spears. And with that, he controlled her whole life, her finances, her personal, her medical decisions. And after all these years, finally on November 12, 2021, she gained her freedom again after a 20-minute testimony made public about how she's been treated by her father, family, and team for the last 13 years. It's actually the media source I put in our discussion. Even if you just skim through it, you can kind of hear like the distress in her voice and how serious she's talking to this judge. Like, she's fighting for her life. Basically, she's scared. She doesn't want to keep being under this. Because a lot of it is her father, her family just using her money, using her. They don't really actually care about her mental well-being. And she just goes on to say how she's been exploited and her home doesn't feel like a home. It feels more like a rehab center. She can't even go outside during the day. She's been forced to do things that she doesn't want to do. And ultimately how it's done more harm than good to her. And it kind of makes you think, like, if she wasn't under this, would she have been, in a better state of well-being all these years? And kind of how she also just went on tour. She was able to work for herself, do all these things. But she wasn't able to, have control over herself, which is kind of odd. Right. Last but not least, kind of in regards to, Brittany's story and what she went through. As we've learned, there is a problem in our system with guardians abusing their power and doing things that benefit them instead of the person they should be caring for. So what could be a possible solution to truly knowing if a guardian has the subject's best interest in mind? Is there like testing we could do on them, or more thorough questioning that would see if they really have like the best heart and interest for the person, or if they're gonna go and abuse it and not use it the way they should?